This is the start of the heating season, and I've put in here some of the top things I've seen gone wrong over the last 6 weeks to 2 months. They're not in any particular order. They are in a little bit of an order. I will be running the polls myself, so that would be kind of fun for a change. My buddy Jason just texted me and said, what did he say? Jason says, I can't log in. The internet strength where I am is too weak. I can't even get a good phone signal. Yeah, whatever. So, and let's see if Teddy answered me. The chat's disabled. Well, don't go to the chat. Put your questions in the question marks, Milik. Don't go to the chat. Put them in the questions. I can only have so many windows open at a time. Ha! So there we go. All right. So we start right out with poll number 1, ladies and gentlemen. So get ready, and I'm going to launch this. Here we go. Hopefully this will go and launch it. There we go. Do you own a combustion analyzer? The answers are no, yes, but I have no idea how to use it, yes, but we never use them, and yes, and we analyze every boiler we install and or service. So, need a hand, Babaloo? Yeah, I do. I really do, David. But I'm doing it, dude. I feel like John Barber last week when he was alone when you were not with him on Monday. Anyway, answer the question, ladies and gentlemen. Submit your questions. Get them in. Get them out there. We got 74. We got 80. We got 67. We got 42. We got keep it going. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. I'm going to give you another minute to do it. So cool. So far, we have 13% of you said no. 13% said yes, but you have no idea how to use it. 6% said yes, but we never use them. But the really good part is 65% of you said you have them and you analyze every boiler you install and service. To you, I say thank you very much. I say thank you, thank you, thank you, and thank you. And we'll close that poll up and we'll go back over here and we'll move this along. So it's that time of year, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, I'm late with this. This should have been an announcement back in September. I apologize for not having a Thirsty Thursday in September. Ted and I were both running back and forth to Toronto and running special, just running trips. It was crazy, so we couldn't get it off. Ted decided on today because 2 weeks ago we were both on the road again. But it's that time of the year. If you have not done so yet, please get your combustion analyzer calibrated now. Send it in. Most manufacturers guarantee you a 24 to 48 hour turnaround. Please send them in, get them calibrated. If your O2 sensor is within the time frame that the manufacturer tells you, for instance, Cytron is 4 years. So in 3 more years, I have to send mine back in, not only to be calibrated, but to get a new oxygen sensor. Some only have a 1 year, some have a 5 year. So please watch what you have. So replace your sensors if you need them and enjoy that one, right? So here's a scenario. Let's start right in with these tech calls. So here's the scenario. The homeowner calls the contractor and says that his vent pipe is blown off his boiler. Now you can see that the vent pipe, it blew off so hard it went right past its polypropylene, and it blew off even though it had locking bands. So either the locking bands weren't correct, or it blew so hard that it took it right off. Yes, it was an NTI boiler. Yes, the homeowner called me and said they wanted a new boiler because it blew up. I said, no, it should be set. So, ready for this one? Poll question number 2. Poll question number 2. Let's launch that. Is the proper thing to do in this situation? Put the vent back on, fire the boiler. If it works okay, tell the homeowner there's nothing wrong, have a great day. Determine what the problem is and fix it. Do 1 and 2, end a combustion analysis, or all the above, including an apology. Answer the questions, ladies and gentlemen. Answer the questions. Oh, whatever. So I'm going to sip my beer here for a second. And Trevor Gephardt, I love you. So yeah, so cool. Keep it coming. You got another 10 seconds. All right. So 6%, well, 5%, yeah, let's hope it keeps on changing because more people are voting. So get your votes in. Get your votes in. 5% of you said put the vent back on, fire the boiler. If it works okay, then walk away. 19% of you said determine the problem and fix it. 29% of you said do 1 and 2 and a combustion analysis. And thank God that 48% of you said all the above. Thank you. Now, let me tell you what actually happened. This is a good customer of mine, and the name goes without saying. I love these guys. They do great work, but I found out that their standard operating procedure that did not used to include doing a combustion analysis once the boiler is installed. Problem number 1. Problem number 2, the guy comes out and puts the pipe back on after knowing that it blew up and it does not show up with a combustion analyzer. And that evening, it blew off again. Now imagine if the homeowner had been away and this boiler continued to fire and blowing carbon monoxide in the house. I can guarantee you it would have been well over. The whole house would have been slaughtered with CO. And that's just an extremely unsafe position to be in. It really is. And the homeowner yelling and screaming, wanting a new boiler. I said, it's not the boiler. Something else is going on. I said, pull the igniter. Here's the igniter they pulled out. And I zoomed in on this. There's less than a paper thickness between the 2 electrodes. Less than a paper thickness, which means the gas would build up and there's not enough spark. And you know we use a 10,000 volt spark ignition. There should be 2 nickels flat between the electrodes. And it had such a small spark that once the gas built all the way up, you got post ignition and boom. Some of the times, not all the time. So when you go on a job like this, please put the venting back on, but then check the electrodes, check the igniter, and then do a combustion analysis and then move on. And I'll add insult to injury. They sent me a copy of the combustion analysis, and those of you who do NTI know that our combustion should always range between 9 and 10.5, right? So some from 9.5 to 10.5, some are 9 to 10, some are 9.6 to 10.6, but they're always right in that area. And sends me a copy of the analysis, and it's at 7.2, which tells me his combustion analyzer was not calibrated because it wouldn't fire at 7.2. So keep that in mind, ladies and gentlemen. Please take due process and make sure that you cover your liability in your butt, because if it goes to court, they're going to call somebody like me. And I got to use standards, boys. I got to use it. And I got to use the I-know manual that tells you to do it. Change your standard operating procedure. If your standard operating procedure is not to do a combustion analysis, please change it to do a combustion analysis at install and do a combustion analysis at every service for the boiler. Only takes 20 minutes. Do it. And record it. Speaking of carbon monoxide hazards, I had a good one the other day. Buy and carry a personal CO detector. I actually have a contractor who owns 2. He owns 2 of them. And he carries one, and when that one goes off and it gets loaded, and they continue to, just like your body, where carbon monoxide loads on 10 times, it stays 10 times longer than oxygen. It actually on gases and off gases the same way as your bloodstream. So it'll keep track of the amount of exposure you have and how much you could have in your bloodstream. So these things are under $200 now. I mean, I just found this TPI 777. It's a brand new unit they came out with, and it was list price is $199.95. I found it on the internet at $149.95. This is cheap insurance. You clip it on, you wear it into every boiler room, you wear it with you all day long. When you're done your day, you put it on your shelf at home, you pick it up in the morning, and you go back to work. It's a good way to ensure that you're not going to die or have carbon monoxide poisoning. Please do it, gentlemen and ladies. That would be great. Remember, you could be in one boiler room now and think that you don't have any CO and go to another room that does. and it's just cumulative all day long. You go home, and if you're not sure of the signs, dizziness, confusion, nausea, unbalance, vertigo, if you want to call it that, and death. So, not something you want to die from. Cool. Expansion tanks. Let's talk about expansion tanks. Expansion tanks do double duty. They take the expansion of the water, right? And they're the point of no pressure change. So they're pretty damn important. You have to have them at the proper pressure, the proper size, and the proper way of installation. So I started doing some research today, and every manufacturer says the proper pressure should match the system pressure. That means that little Schrader air valve that's on the bottom of the hang downs. Let's see if I can get my cursor over here. The little Schrader valve down here, or the Schrader valve at the top of the floor mounts, before you put pressure on it, and once it's up to room temperature, should be your system operating pressure. And you know that if there's a pressure switch inside of your boiler, like our TRX and our FTVN, you should run an 18-pound system, which means you have to charge it to 18 pounds. You have to test it before you install it. If you don't, I have measured pressure on these from 3 to 14 pounds coming off the shelf when I had my supply house. And if it's down at 3 or has none, and you go putting this on the system, you're going to blow the diaphragm. And if a diaphragm breaks, somebody's getting pregnant. So please make sure you check the pressure on all your tanks before you put them in. And for God's sake, we all carry battery-powered compressors that, whether you're a Milwaukee guy or a Rigid guy or whatever you're carrying, we all have the compressor that goes with it. Please make sure that you test it before you put it in. So then I went to the Amtrol site, and I compared this to the FlexCon site and a couple of Wessel site, and they all said the same thing. They said, first, charge it correctly, drain the boiler system or isolate the area where the extra is going to be installed, install the extra on the supply side of the boiler, on the suction side of the heating circulators, point of no pressure change, right? Pressurize the system, check for leaks, repairs necessary, restart the boiler, and check the relief valve for discharge, yada, yada, yada. If you're not sure of the signs of a bladder tank or an expansion tank being either undersized or not having a charge anymore, when the boiler starts up, the pressure goes to 30 and your relief valve blows. So please, 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 expansion tank, you should have the fill. Look, it shows the fill valve going right into the expansion tank. Amtrol's still using an old style Taco air scoop with an air vent on the top, which we know if it's 18 pipe diameter or 18 inches away from this elbow, it works just fine. Not as good as a microbubble air absorber, but still works really well. Expansion tank hanging down. Now, I've seen a lot of tanks on their side. I've seen a lot of tanks pointing up. And I can tell you this, there's not a soul out there anymore that is showing that in any of their installation manuals. Hang them down, boys. And if you really want to get cool, Axiom and Califfi, I think that's the two manufacturers, correct me if I'm wrong, have brackets that hang on the wall that you can screw these onto, so you no longer have to support them by the pipe, which is pretty damn cool, right? Pretty damn cool. Oh, somebody was trying to come in. Huh, cool. All right. So it's time for poll question number 3. And launch it. So, when installing an expansion tank, do you check the pressure before install, mount it horizontally, mount it hanging down, mount it pointing up, or all the above? Huh. Wow. There should be 2 correct answers here, and I'll take either one. So cool. So you guys are putting them in, putting them in, putting them in, putting them in. 60 seconds to do it. The score of the Phillies game is still 1-1. Yay, that's good stuff. Wayne Schmidt, I hope you heard my TPI little song and dance earlier. David, thank you for noticing. Yes, I went to the TED Low School of Voice this week. All right, give you another 10 seconds to go. All right. So there's 2 correct answers. The 2 correct answers are check the pressure before you install it and mount it hanging down. Whoever said all the above, please note that if you mount it horizontally or mount it pointing up with the threads pointing down on a hanging tank, not on a floor mount tank, that air will get captivated in there and you'll reduce the amount of expansion volume that you can actually get into that tank. So please take note of that. All right, let's close that. So geez, guys, here's a standard application, a standard boiler installation. I'm actually showing a Takeo air scoop with a extra tank, just like you saw. I have 4 zones on here with circulators, and this is the way we used to do all of our boilers. So a lot of them were summer winter hookups, and or they had a water heater to the side, and we wanted to add an indirect water heater. So if you're not sure what we used to do, because there was usually not much room and it was much easier just to do what? Put them to the side. But this is going to cause some issues. Yeah. So let's talk about those issues and go to poll question number 4. Poll question number 4. What potential problem could happen with that type of installation, having your indirect water heater at the very end of the run? None of the zones could have flow. You get ghost flow in some of the zones. The indirect water heater won't get enough hot water, or none of the above. Answer the questions. Put them in, put them in, put them in. Here we go. 60 seconds. Yep. Keep it going. All right. Answers are still coming in. Get your answers in, boys and girls. We do this, keep you ready and on your toes. All right. All right, is everybody in? You got 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, polls closed. All right. So what could this cause? None of the zones could have flow. Of course, that's not the correct answer. You get ghost flow in some of the zones. It's very possible. The indirect water heater won't get enough flow, especially if all the zones are calling. It's going to get kind of lagged back unless you have the right size piping. Or none of the above is never the answer, so I can't give it to you that way. So you, 18% of you who said that, you're wrong. So here's what happens in this situation, and I'll tell you from firsthand experience. There was a master bedroom suite that was added on that was only about 400 square feet. They had a 2-ton air conditioner that was doing just that room. And in August, it couldn't keep up. And it was not that hot of a summer here in Pennsylvania. It was warm, but that 2-ton air conditioner should have walked away with that thing without a problem. For God's sake, I got a 1,600 square foot house I run on a 2-ton air conditioner. So, I mean, it should have walked away. So I go into the bedroom, and I'm trying to figure out why the air conditioner's not working because, well, you know, we sized the air conditioner. So I go over and I actually got near the baseboard and felt heat. What was happening is the heat through gravity was actually going up the returns as the indirect was calling. And since they had this new great bathroom, they put the indirect in because they had, you know, the rain head, 3 body sprays on each side. They got a handheld shower head. They're using a ton of water. So this thing's running all the time at 180 degrees. And that flow is just going right up the returns, gravity feeding up that 3/4 inch pipe, cold water's coming down, hot water's going up, and that baseboard was blaring in that master bedroom. So how do you think we fixed it? I worked for a guy at one time growing up, back when I was in my teens, that would fix that by putting zone valves on the returns and to go with the circulators, which is kind of like belt and suspenders, I guess, which would work. And then I had another guy say, well, you know, you could put thermal traps, 18-inch pieces of pipe hanging down on the supply and return. Here I only show it on the supply so the hot water can't go up. That would be fine too. But wouldn't it be easier? Would it not be easier just to repipe the indirect where it should be, the first thing off, so the hot water during the summer can never get to the zones? Wouldn't that make more sense? By the way, Frank, your answer, the pumps have check valves on them. Discharge, you can't get airbound. That's correct. If the pumps have check valves on the discharge, you can get airbound. That's correct. If you have the check valves and you have zone valves, you could get airbound easy. Yeah. So, but yeah, it's check valve on the supply and return don't work, boys. You can't put dual check valves on a zone. Can't do it. Shouldn't put zone valves and circulators with check valves on it either. So the correct answer is to repipe it or put the thermal traps on it. Silly, isn't it? So now let's talk about outdoor reset. Something nobody ever understands, something that nobody ever talks about, something nobody tells their homeowners about, something that you guys use, what I like to say, the Dave Haldorf contractor anti-callback mode, which is what you guys do is you put a condensating boiler in and you don't put in the outdoor sensor and you run that thing at 180 degrees all the time. You don't have to worry about it. They always have heat because all outdoor reset does is set the temperature down as the air temperature outside goes up. So we're only putting enough energy into the house to make up for the energy going out of the house. The problem is that right now our boiler system just sees this, right? It just sees open and closed contact. So you guys, instead of putting boost mode in, or instead of increasing the temperature a little bit to satisfy the people, or teach the people why they should leave their thermostats alone, huge thing, right? So it's outdoor reset's a cool thing. It saves you between 14 and 20% of your fuel bill. That was something that came out of Techmar. So I had a guy the other day on the internet who said you can't use reset on baseboard and on cast iron radiators. And then somebody answered him, said, we're saving 30 to 70% of our fuel bill doing it on both baseboard, radiators, and convectors. So screw you, pal. And he's right, because most of the houses have 40 to 60% more baseboard in them than they need. Because even if you did a heat load when it was put in, I guarantee you it's already oversized. So outdoor reset works just fine on these. So this brings up another poll question, because I love poll questions. Here we go. Get ready for this one. This is going to be fun. I can't wait to see your answers. Can you do outdoor reset with a cast iron boiler? Answer one, heck no, you can't have a cast iron boiler condensate. You condense, it's going to crack the back section or wear it out. Or sure, why not? Just install it as normal. Or yes, with the right piping and controls. Or absolutely not. There's your answers, boys and girls. Put them in, because this is history with me. This goes way back with me and the early days of cast iron and reset. And the early days of primary, secondary piping. And God bless you guys. I don't know if you changed your answers or not, but you're coming in pretty good. Just keep on going. Answer the questions, boys and girls. Give you another 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Sorry, Schwarber just got up to bat. So let me tell you your answers. This is good. Nobody said heck no. Thank you. Nobody said absolutely not. 15% of you said sure, why not just install it as normal? Okay, good. And 86% of you said yes with the right piping and controls. So let me close this and let me move on here and show you how we used to do it. So we would use a thing called a Techmar 261 that would inject the boiler into the main loop. And this is where primary, secondary came in back in the late 80s, early 90s, where we had this primary loop in the middle with a primary circulator. And anytime anything called, this circulator would run and run and run and run. And the Techmar control with its sensor strapped on right here or down here, where you have 18 inches of pipe away from the two closely spaced T's, would tell the boiler it needs to fire. Now the boiler would run with its circulator and allow the boiler to get up to 180 degrees so it wasn't condensing, injecting itself up into the main, bring the main up to the temperature it needed to be. If your indirect was calling, it was going to 180. If the indirect wasn't calling and one of the other zones was calling, it would go down and work on outdoor reset. Now, one of the problems you have with this situation is we get back to the ghost flow with gravity feed again. So a lot of times when you did this, if you had any zones that were straight up, right above that loop, you'd have to put thermal traps on them. And those thermal traps need to be at least 18 inches away from an elbow or from another set of closely spaced tees. You need 18 inches of difference so that those closely spaced tees don't see a difference in pressure, difference in velocity, and get any flow through there. So that was doing primary, secondary in the early days, which is why when you ask me what you have, when you have primary, secondary with a control with, you call me up with a condensing boiler and say you have primary, secondary, and I say, that's great. Which pump's not running? Well, the primary pump. Was the primary pump the zone pump or the boiler circulator? Because here we have a zone circulator, a primary circulator, and a boiler circulator. And now with a condensing boiler, we do primary, secondary without using the loop. But the funny thing is when we say this, that you don't need to have the primary circulator with a condensing boiler, it's because we don't want the primary loop. We want you to do moose antlers, right? We want you to do moose antlers, no loop. So I have a few guys this year who put this loop in and said, Steve said we don't need a circulator, so we're not going to do it. And they just didn't put the circulator in. Well, now the water doesn't know how to get to the zones. So now the boiler gets hot and the zones don't get hot, and the water doesn't know where to go unless you move it. So don't do this unless you're going to use the circulator. Cool. And this is how we do primary, secondary with a condensing boiler. And you guys should all know this. I mean, I think you all know it. And, we use the indirect. And, when we're doing outdoor reset, and the zones are calling, the boiler pump injects itself up into the main at the right temperature. The zones call and call and call. When the indirect water heater needs hot water, it turns the boiler circulator off, turns the indirect circulator on, takes the boiler to 180. When that's satisfied, it turns this circulator off, turns the boiler circulator back on, and goes back down to outdoor reset. So it's pretty cool. So yeah, Frank Durant, I agree with you. I love Boost, and Dave Halldorf, absolutely. Cast iron radiant, love outdoor reset. Cool. All right, water quality. Gentlemen, I feel like a broken record here. I really do. I mean, we've been preaching water quality forever. I saw it again. I had one of my best customers the other day kill a 399, 1 out of 3. I actually cut it apart right here at my house. I said, I'll make you a deal. I'll cover the warranty if you bring the boiler here, because you've been doing it right all these years. I just want to show you what it looks like. Bring the boiler here. I'm going to cut it open in front of you. I'll have a couple beers. You guys know I have a 6-tap system over here, right? I have a 6-tap system. We had a beer. We cut it apart. Diamond cutoff saw, cut it open. I showed him what he had. He was like, holy shit. Yeah, this is magnetite. If you can't see that, let me zoom in. This is magnetite. That's the black shit that's in the water, right? You got to take care of that. You got to remediate it. It will kill your boilers. This is a water tube heat exchanger, and look how thin the stainless is here compared to how thick it is on the outside, because the water absorbs into that magnetite, and when the boiler fires, it can't get out of its way, so it starts to boil, and it sounds like percolating, right? And you guys may have been on water tube boilers that have been percolating. That's a buildup of magnetite. Then people say to me, oh, but can I just put descaler in it? Guys, I can tell you, I've tried to break this off with a chisel. You can. It ain't easy. It ain't happening. I mean, chances are you're going to buy a new heat exchanger, and on this one, there was all pinholes. You can see the pinholes down here. There's pinholes from the magnetite. We cut them apart and show you. It doesn't matter. But now let's look at some water tubes of what happens with water quality. So let's cut this bad puppy open. That's calcium. That's calcium because they had a leak. Not only did they have a leak, this is the second one that went. I told them to fix the leak. I can't give you a second free boiler. Why? Because I cut the first one apart. I didn't do it. This is what caused me to go buy a diamond cutoff saw. I sent it back to the factory. And you ready for this? This is the picture they sent me. Wait for this. That's a crap load of calcium inside, ain't it? So that's all broken apart because we sent it back to Canada, and Canada cut it open. So now it's bounced from here to Canada, and they cut it open. This is what they sent me. And it literally melted the burner door because the sensors were covered in calcium and couldn't sense the temperature. you can't use a fired tube on domestic water, and you can't use a fired tube with constant water. Now, if you think there's a problem, what I did at this place, and the way I know they were losing 400 gallons of water a day, is I went out and bought a $39 on the internet, $39 3/4 inch cheap water meter, and stuck it on the fill valve. Stuck it on the fill line. Wrote the number down. And a week later, wrote the number down. And they were losing over 400 gallons a month in the heating system. Then they found the leak. So please don't do this. But now let's look at what happens with magnetite, right? This is what kills the boiler. And I can tell it's what killed the boiler because when you pull the burner door off, it's all rusty inside because this magnetite gathers around the outside of the heat exchanger on the tube sheet, and then it cracks the tube sheet right here in the center. Right within the first 3 tubes, it cracks it. And it sprays all over the place, and the combustion chamber, when you open up the burner door, is all rusty and all wet. Yeah, duh. Go figure that one, right? So, don't think that it takes a long time to do it. Why? Because this boiler was installed January 10th and failed March 16th of the same year. So you think it takes a long time? It can take 3 years, it can take 6 years, it can take 8 years, it can take 6 weeks. It all depends on how crappy your water is. And believe me, growing up, I was told that black water was king. Black water means you have no oxygen coming in, that's perfect. Yeah, bullshit. Any cast iron you have in the system, whether it's cast iron circulators, a cast iron boiler, cast iron pipe, cast iron radiators, any steel in the system, any of it, is going to be attacked by the amount of oxygen in the water. Capture that. It's not the amount of cast iron, it's the amount of oxygen. The oxygen still has to dissipate and get rid of the extra oxygen or the air in the oxygen in the air that's in the water, and it's still going to eat the same amount of cast iron. It's still going to create the same amount of rust. I just had somebody the other day post, yeah, you should put a magnetic filter and you should treat all your systems, even if everything you have on the system is copper, except for the circulators. And yes, just the circulators will do this. Unbelievable. So water quality, there's a handout in the handout section on that pullout. If you've closed it, if you hit the right arrow and go down to handouts, there's the most latest version. It's very complete on what we expect for water quality for any condensing boiler. This is not an NTI problem. This represents between water tube and fire tubes over 95% of the condensing boilers put out there. The rest are copper that's inside of aluminum or aluminum straight. So please make sure that you do it for all of them. With the old boiler installed, if you can, if it's not leaking, flush and clean the boiler, flush and clean the system using Fernox 3, 80 MC3, boiler mag number 3, or Sentinel 400. If you have no heat, you have to inject 1 can of it is good for the smallest quantities, 26 gallons. On Fernox and 80, it's 32 gallons of water. You can't put too much in. So if you're not sure of the amount of system you have, if you think, it could be 24, it could be 35, then put in 2 cans. It's not going to hurt it. Run the circulators for 4 days. It will lift up everything. It's called a cleaner, but it really is more like an emulsifier. It's not going to clean the scale off the pipe. It's going to take all that loose shit and get it in solution, right? Then after 4 days with no heat, or after 4 hours with heat, you have to dump the system within 14 days. Because after 14 days, it starts to dissipate. The magnetite starts to come back out of solution, and you need to do it again. Flush the system out. Pull the boiler, put in the new boiler, right? Put in the new condensing boiler or whatever boiler you're putting in, and fill it. And however many cans of number 1 you put in, number 3 you put in number 1. If it was X400, it'd be X100. It's all the same stuff, guys. It's all made the same factory. And if you leave a little number 3 behind, it doesn't matter because it works well with number 1. Believe it or not, a little number 3 left over is okay because it still keeps things cleaner and gets stuff back to the magnetic filter. Here you see 2 magnetic filters. You see one by Fernox and you see the MagnaClean by 80. I will admit, I love Fernox, but the 80 is the easiest one to clean because when you pull it out, there's a plastic sleeve over the magnetic, and you take it out of the sink, you pull the magnet out and rinse off the plastic and put it back in. There is a filter on the bottom. You got to pop off and clean that too when you have the plastic off. It quarter turns out, pops in, turns in, and locks in. And on the Fernox one, all you do is you turn the valves off on the supply and return, just like you would the 80, and you pull the magnet out the top and you open the drain down the bottom, and you dump it into a bucket. You open up the supply valve and dump it down into the bucket, and you're all clean. But yeah, the nice thing about the 80 is that if you don't want to buy the aerosol cans, 1 quart in the smallest 80 residential unit, 1 quart will fill up that unit. Put it back in, open the valves, you're back in business. Cool. Filtration, make sure you're filtering if you got chunks. If you're not going to use a magnetic filter, use a Y strainer to catch the shit. Dirt separators are great. I've been selling dirt separators as a wholesaler. That when I was in wholesale, I've been out of wholesale now for 13 years, but I was in wholesale for 24. I used to sell dirt separators on almost all my old boiler systems, especially if they're steel or cast iron. Now I use magnets because they have a dirt separator built in, and it catches the crap from getting back and hurting the boiler. This is not just a condensing boiler situation. If you have an atmospheric gas boiler that's not wet legged or wet based, that means the only water is above the flame. That magnetite will settle down on top of the flame and you'll crack sections there too. Yeah. I know how many warranties I was denied by my boiler supplier back in the day from magnetite. So it's not just condensing boilers, do it on all of them. Oh, look, it's another poll question. Son of a gun. Let's bring that poll question up. Let's launch it. Cool. When you arrive on a job with a flame lockout or combustion problems, you should do a combustion analysis, check the propane regulator or the gas supply using a manometer at the boiler, check the intake and exhaust terminations, or all the above. Answer the questions, guys. Answer the questions. So far, a whole bunch of guys are jumping on. Just one of those. So please, jump in and enjoy it. Jump it in. 100%. Come on. That's it. 2 of you are voted. Let's keep going. Let's see if this thing's working. Cool. Keep it going. You guys are all thinking it's all the above. Everybody's answering all the above, huh? Wow. Really? Cool. So guys, I'm going to tell you this. Even though you installed the job and you installed it correctly and you know you installed it correctly, never assume anything. Wait till you see this. I'm going to close this poll. You're going to see it. Never assume anything. This is a house that had the intake and exhaust outside. The exhaust was pointing out instead of down. It should have been pointed down, but whoever corrected it when they put the addition on didn't want the stuff blowing on the side, and they thought that was the exhaust, so they just cut it off and turned around and pointed it at the house. Wrong place. You know there's a dead air space along the house where even when the wind's blowing, there's about a 1/4 inch of dead air space where anything that blows against it stays. Any smoke, any carbon monoxide lays right in there. Wow. Isn't that fun? And here they put an addition on. Guy goes out to do a combustion analysis. Boiler's not firing. He doesn't think of stopping and looking at the vent. No, he did it. It can't be the vent. This is what he found. 15-inch water column gauge. Oh, cool. Frank Durant says, I'll just throw in here, he installs a 0 to 15-inch water column gauge on all propane installs. Frank, I don't blame you. The biggest problem I have with propane is water getting into the regulator and freezing it. Yes, every time they fill a propane tank, they're supposed to put methane in it because the only way water can get into a propane tank is if they pump it. Of course, I had one the other day that they made sure they had enough enough methane. They put in too much methane, and that's not a good thing either. All right, so wait a minute. Wait for this picture. Ready for this one? These are two. I mean, literally, folks, I just got these pictures within the last 8 days. They put a walk-in cooler outside the house, outside the building. Put it right up against the exhaust. Is that a killer? And they're out there for a no flame call, a no heat call. No shit. No shit. Is that crazy? They had to, you can't even service this thing. Unbelievable. You can't make this shit up. Never assume anything. I had one yesterday that had a concentric vent that had a problem with combustion, and the venturi and the blower were full of carbon and sticky stuff, right? And the orifices on the venturi were all clogged. Go outside, and the concentric vent is covered in ivy because they let ivy grow across their house because it's so beautiful and we like it. Please, guys, before you go in the house, look at the vent. Don't assume that because you did it right, like shown here in the picture, that you did that everything's fine. Meaning that the intake, oh, if I could make this happen, here we go. The intake needs to be 12 inches above the snow grade and pointing straight down, within 12 inches side by side, but above 18 inches vertically, you need to have the exhaust. That's if you're using a 2-pipe system. Of course, we allow you to use the low profile vents, and please use the low profile vents that we tell you are approved. And the reason for that is because there's 2 manufacturers out there that supply low profile vents that are cheap, but the exhaust pipe does not go past the plate. It terminates under the plate and always leaks into the intake. So that's why we don't approve them. So please make sure it's one of the 3 we approve that's in the installation operation manual. That guy happened to blow his fan. Well, the fan actually launched in 18 months because of the wrong low profile vent. So we allow to use concentric vents, both horizontally and vertically. Make sure that they're 12 inches above the snow grade. And if you go 2 pipes out the roof, the same rules apply. 12 inches above the snow line on the intake, pointing straight down, within 12 inches and 18 inches above at the exhaust. All those elbows should be pointed away from the peak. All right. I hate to have to say this, but if you use a chimney as a pipe chase for your intake and exhaust, please make sure there's not a working chimney next to it. Yeah, seen that this year too. And of course, I always suggest that you use polypropylene because it comes in a flexible kit. You can drop it straight down and take your air intake from another wall. Cool. One last one. Wow, I'm on time frame. So one last one. It's amazing that I actually can do these and actually keep within our time frame. This one last one comes to us from our good friend Jason Mangos, who said, "Wheels, you got to make sure you cover this." So I said, "Okay, Jason, that's not a problem because I see it all the time." High temperature lockouts. It's not just NTI, folks. It's not just the NTI net control that gives you a 101 to a 104 lockout. It's every single modulating condensing boiler out there that has a high limit and a delta T range, but you'll get a high temperature lockout if you have no flow or a high delta T. Now, no flow, of course, it just goes right up, right? Which is also going to be a high delta T. But if you have low flow, you could have, on some of the boilers, they lock out at 70-degree difference between the supply and return. Some lock out at 90, some somewhere in between, but they still lock out at lack of flow to protect the boiler. Check if the heat exchanger is airbound, particularly on a water tube heat exchanger. Check the boiler filter. Yes, some boilers have filters on the incoming line. That's to protect the boiler. Now, I just told you to put a filter on the return coming back, or a magnetic filter on the return coming back from the system. That will not create a high delta T on the boiler because the boiler will slow down because of its thermistors on the supply and return. So, but it will create a no flow situation in the building, but that's not what we're worried about here. We're worried about high temperature lockouts. Check the boiler pump and the system pump. The boiler pump is really particular. You know, on our boilers, we have Taco 00E pumps, phenomenal pump, absolutely great pump. The problem is the 00E pump says, okay, if you put magnetite or something solid between my impeller and the magnetic drive, it will lock, but it will sit there and jiggle itself. It'll jiggle and try to jiggle and try to jiggle, and it'll keep doing this until it can spin itself free, right? except for by the time it breaks itself free a lot of time on our boilers, and we're rewriting the software to help this, it'll lock out because it didn't give it enough time to break its ass free. So please, if you're on one of my boilers and you think it's the impeller, try recycling the boiler. Try hitting the reset once or twice. By the way, on my boilers, if it's a reset button, it's a touch, not a push. Just touch it and walk away. Don't hold it, just touch it. If it's a red R, just touch it and let the boiler do it again. I did this on Saturday night when I was in Vermont. One of my techs called and said, what do I do? What do I do? I got to log up. What are we going to do? I said, well, you could pull the pump out and clean the pump because 90% of the pumps we get back, they're supposed to be defective or just jam full of shit. Or it's 10 o'clock at night. Let's just try hitting the reset button once or twice. And the first time you hit it, broke free, lights went back to green, everybody's happy. It was a great day, and the boiler started working. All things were good. Now, and I also said, please clean the system and put a magnetic filter on the return. So improper piping will cause it, where your two pumps are fighting each other. That's kind of fun. Safety circuit failure will cause this. A safety circuit failure on most people boilers will actually give you a high temperature lockout. Won't tell you that it's a low water cutoff that you put on the safety circuit. Won't tell you it's the high limit you put on the safety circuit. It just tells you that it's locked out on flame. It just locks out the flame. So it's the safety circuit. So see what you did to that. So, or it could be a bad supply or a bad return sensor. You know, if they don't read correctly, you'll get the wrong temperature. If you get the wrong temperature, the brain gets the wrong thought of what's going on, and it won't work. Huh. So ohm out your sensors, or try switching your supply and return sensor if you can. I know in my boilers, the return and supply sensors are identical. You just have to change their locations and see what happens. Huh. Ohm the sensor out. Most of them are a 10K ohm sensor. 10K ohm sensor. Yeah. So you can look up on the chart on the 10K ohm sensor. Everybody has what. You can look it up on the TechMar page. You can look it up in the back of my I&O manual. I'll tell you what the ohm rating should be based on the temperature. Cool. Is it a combi? Now this brings in something new. If it's a combi and has a diverter valve on it, which it has to have to divert the heating water to the indirect heat exchanger, it might be that you had enough shit in that system that you blocked the heat exchanger on the domestic. Something I've never looked for until the last 2 years. So there's all the ways that you have a high temperature lockout, guys. So with that, it's 2 minutes to 8. I'd like to thank you guys for coming.
Thanks for watching the video today. If you'd like to check out more videos, see the link below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for all the future updates. And also check us out on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram.